order, continuation of CARES Act funding discussion. Let's go ahead and do introductions. We'll start around this side with Jason and just go all the way around.
Jason Bockenstead, Chief of Staff for the Mayor.
Alex Litka, Chief Fiscal Officer.
Barbara Jones, Municipal Clerk.
Forrest Dunbar, Andrew Assembly.
Thanks, Alisa.
Cameron Perez Review.
Shelley Wade, Agnew Beck.
Christopher Constant.
Oh, Austin Hernandez.
Felix Rivera. And then we also have some other clerks, wonderful clerk staff here. So first, just a quick introduction before I turn it over to Shelley with Agnew Beck. So first, want to really thank both Cameron and Shelley for their assistance in organizing this meeting. I think it's going to be a wonderful all day long extravaganza. And want to thank the staff of the Denina Center. I think we have two staff members who are here and willing and able to help us with whatever needs that we have on coffee, tea, etc. And want to also thank the IT staff that are helping us as well. So we have done a lot of work up to this point, and I really want to applaud all of us for engaging in this process. Many months and many hours of work. Today, we are here to hopefully not necessarily finish up this process, but get through, I think, a really important step in this process. Today, we're going to be doing a lot of sharing, imagining productive and thoughtful work. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful facilitator with Agnew Beck. Just one quick protocol thing. So please continue if you want to, when we need to have sort of a formal queue type discussion, I will go ahead and manage the queue, but otherwise I'm okay with a more sort of free-flowing discussion. And as usual with rules, just like the Rules Committee meetings, we'll go ahead and do first names, and also want to note for the record that we have both Mr. Weddleton, John Weddleton, and Pete Peterson on the phone, and we also have members of the administration who are on the phone. We have Chris Schutte, and Jason, do you want to introduce any other members of admin? Do you know if anyone else is here? Okay. All right. Well, at least I know we have Chris Schutte online. So with that, I'll turn it over to Shelley.
Okay, thank you so much, Felix. So, again, my name is Shelley Wade. I'm with Agnew Beck Consulting, and so very honored for the opportunity to work with you today. So just wanted to do a quick little review of our work session objectives. So if you could first, and before we do that, actually, if you could move the slide presentation forward. If we could just take a moment to do a land acknowledgement, and for all of us to embrace the idea that we live and work on the land of the Denina. So I wanted to start the meeting that way today. Thank you. Go ahead and go forward. And we've just done introductions, and so I'll take us right to our next slide, which is just a little reminder of why we are gathered today. And so Felix has started us out with a broad overview, and the more specifics are, this is really an opportunity to agree on a framework and a process for identifying and prioritizing investments for CARES Act funding. And certainly we will not accomplish, as Felix already mentioned, we will not do all of that process or get through all of that process today, but at a minimum, have the opportunity to really share a potential framework, talk about the components of that framework and process, and then, again, most importantly, the opportunity for assembly members and the administration to really share their different proposals and project ideas. So we understand a lot of work has already happened to this end, so we're excited to hear more about that today. And then lastly, we'll talk about and agree on a timeline and some outputs for next steps. So if you can go ahead and move us 2 slides forward. So I think Felix already mentioned just getting in the queue and working with him to do that as we take an opportunity to share by assembly member and administration today. And then one thing that we thought that would be a helpful way to start our discussion is if we could hear from assembly members and administration as you're comfortable sharing. As you understand what the work session objectives are, if we could hear from you and get a sense of potentially what is the one thing that you want to walk away with today, so your real hope for this conversation. So again, as Felix mentioned, we have a full, luxurious day together. And so what's the one hope that you have for this discussion and this dialogue? And then secondly, is there something that you want to not happen? So potential fear for this discussion or a direction that you do not want the conversation to go. So happy to start wherever we are comfortable. Felix, maybe you want to kick us off.
Thanks. Actually, not want to kick us off, but just one logistical thing.
Yes.
So for assembly members who are on the phone, I don't know if they have access to this PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Could you email this PowerPoint to me, or if we could get it to the clerk so the members could get the
Sure thing.
PowerPoint? Thanks.
Yeah, I think
Maybe we just got an email.
Yeah, I don't know if that was the PowerPoint though.
Yeah, that may not have been the PowerPoint. And with the Zoom, are you sharing the slides though? Yeah, okay. So if folks are connected through Zoom, you should be able to see it on your screen. But for folks that are, yes, connected through phone, we can certainly send it to you. And it's a fairly short.
And I'm on mute.
Say it again, I'm sorry.
Off mute.
John Middleton here, and I'm on Zoom, and maybe clueless, but all I'm looking at is my keypad for my phone. And I've done Zoom before, and I get the whole package. So what am I missing here?
We'll go ahead and get an email to you because Pete is on Zoom and he can see it. So yeah, maybe it's just different technology, different issues. So we will get an email to you, John.
Yeah, and the good news for everyone is that it is a really short set of slides, and the most important slide is the framework slide, which we'll get to here momentarily. So they're just about 7 slides, and the one that we're looking at right now is says hopes and fears for the day. And so again, was hoping to hear from assembly members, and maybe it's just a process of kind of giving everyone the opportunity, Felix, if that makes sense for you. Okay. And maybe I'll start to my left here. Cameron, would you like to share with the group your one hope and fear for the day?
Sure, thank you. My one hope for the day is that we walk away with, I guess I'm a cheat and say two. My 2 hopes for the day is that we walk away with some general understanding and guidelines for how we're going to make the decisions what we're going to make, and 2, that we learn a lot about what everyone else is working on or planning to work on, and so those are the 2 things that I really want to walk away with. And the one fear is that we'll go down a rabbit hole. We'll get stuck in a process or a discussion around a particular smaller piece and get lost down that rabbit hole. So I want to just make sure that we stay on on a little bit of a higher plane in terms of both a framework and a general understanding of how we're going to move forward as a group. Thanks.
Thank you, Cameron. And maybe we'll just continue around the table this way, if you could please share.
Sure. So hope is that we walk away with the projects divided as presented into the urgency categories we talked about, particularly any of the, and with kind of a timeline on when we're going to bring them forward. I'm feeling a little bit like we're languishing, and that is my fear, is that we're going to get bogged down in a process and not come out with tangible proposals that we're ready to put forward to the body for vote and appropriation to get this money out. Thanks.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, if you could please identify yourself before you share, that would be great.
Thank you. This is Forrest. I'm Barb. I think my hope and concern is similar to Ms. Zalatel's. My hope is that we finish today with something that perhaps isn't a comprehensive list, but is pretty close. That we have a pretty good sense of what we intend to spend the CARES Act money on, and it's specific. to, and I think we all understand, it's important that a lot of these funds be deployed quickly because of the nature of the catastrophe that our community is going through right now. My fear is that we will, and I don't know if this is similar or the exact opposite of what Mr. Treasury has said, it's kind of funny, but I think I'm worried we'll get bogged down too, but I'm worried we'll get bogged down in the sense that we will leave here with only sort of broad concepts up on the board or agreed to or even having been spoken about. And the effect of that is one, it delays actual programs being deployed, and two, and no offense to Mr. Bach's dad or anyone else in the administration, but it really empowers the administration vis-a-vis the assembly. If we aren't able to come up with some list of things that we can agree to or that we at least want to put on the table, what it does is exceeds our basically our ability to plan to the administration, who are, I assume, going to put forward, if not now, then relatively soon, a coherent set of their priorities. Thank you.
Thank you. And Christopher, I'm going to move to you.
Great. Thank you. This is Christopher Thompson here. And there's a middle road between the two perspectives. What I'm hoping we do is have a really thoughtful conversation about the broad and arching methods and approach that we want to get there. And I also want to have kind of a lively and more peppery conversation about this project, that project, all of the ideas that we can get kind of comfortable to the board that we can start to then divide into kind of targeted areas that will help us to understand where we're all leaning. And so once we see those targeted areas, then that will allow all of us collectively to start to see where we can make investments that achieve those broader goals. And so I'm hopeful that in this day we do both of those things, and we do it in a way that is in part very thoughtful and then in part more creative and more free-flowing, so that we can be interacting and really get into the creative moment, the flow. Because if we stay in control, I think that we'll miss an opportunity for creativity to guide us. And I'm an artist, and so and I don't really have any fear. I'm really extraordinarily grateful that we're here to do this work right now. We have an opportune time to do this. There's pressure coming from all directions. No one's demanding we do things, and ironically, the things that demanding we are actually doing. And so this will give us an opportunity. I guess maybe one fear I do have is that we, and I've said this a number of times, that we get to the point where we overreach in the spending in the early phase of this. I'm really afraid of what comes in October and November, when school goes back, when the economy starts to really rattle and the wheels start flying off. If they do, I would like us to reserve a substantial portion of these funds to be able to have a similar conversation once the snow flies, so that we are not left with an empty bag when we realize we need it the most.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shelley. This is Austin. Similar to my colleagues, my hope is to come out with some sort of plan and to take action soon. And correspondingly, I guess my fear and concern is just that we might get bogged down a little bit and want to move swiftly on the things that we need to move swiftly on.
Thank you.
This is Felix. Yeah, so I think a couple of hopes sort of tied together. First is that we come to the table willing and able to share comfortably and as much as we can. I think this is the space for us to put our ideas out there. And in that vein, fear is that we don't come out of this with something that is tangible, has meat on the bones, and that we can share with our community, which is, I think, an important aspect for me. And it's been sort of hindering the conversation that I wanted to have with the community around CARES Act funds. Is we don't have necessarily a framework developed or concrete ideas that we can go and say, what do you think about this? So that's a fear that I have. We're not going to have that at the end of the day.
Thank you, Felix. So how about assembly members that are on the phone? And Mr. Peterson, if you can hear me, we're sharing our one hope and one fear for the day.
Yes, thank you. And my hope is that we feel comfortable with the list that we end up with, and those items will not need to be reimbursed by the federal funding at some point in the future. And then my fear, I guess, would be that we try to find the perfect thing when there are good things that would work on the list that we end up leaving behind.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton, if you can hear me?
He's on mute.
John, are you there?
He really
You
is.
might be on mute.
Okay, can you hear me?
There we go.
Voices are a little bit quiet on my phone, and I have the volume up to max, so just as people are speaking, it's working, but it's a little bit quiet. That's not my greatest fear. I think along with everyone else, I would like to be moving very quickly to a good list of dollar amounts on it that we can start. Really have something to talk about, and I guess my fear is that we don't do that today. And just for everybody, I will be here a little bit sporadically, and I have to leave about 2:30.
Okay, thank you. Am I missing anybody any assembly members that were on the phone? Nope, we got everyone? Okay.
She's running late. Yeah.
Okay. How about any administrative staff that would like to share their hope or fear for the day?
I don't think I have much different than what I think kind of the consensus has been. I'm very interested in, continuing to hear the different ideas, and obviously we will share some from the administration's perspective. I think one of the big things that will help us with is we're ultimately responsible for administering whatever the programs are, and that takes time, energy, and people. So to the extent that we can understand what that looks like and make sure that those individuals are prepared and have the resources necessary to do that work, that will be very helpful as we move forward. So I think that's where I am. I don't know if Alex has anything.
Thank you.
I just have one hope that we as the administration are able to clearly communicate that we will be able to spend all this money by the end of the year legally and in compliance with federal guidelines. We know we can do that, and my hope is that you reach that same level of understanding and comfort.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for sharing that. That helps to set the tone, and also I think confirms that we're on the right track with the agenda that we've developed today. So maybe just as a quick reminder, and hopefully folks that are on the phone have now received all of the materials, including the PowerPoint presentation. But just a quick reminder, we are going to transition here soon into a brief overview of the CARES Act funding, and Jason's going to provide that for us. And then we will go right into the work that I have just heard from you is very much of interest, and that is to think about what the potential framework will look like for identifying and making some of the key decisions around priorities for these investments. So we have a slot of time really designated to do that this morning, and then this afternoon is that opportunity to really share proposals and get into the details. And so hopefully Assembly members and administration had the opportunity to do some of the pre-work, and again, I know that a lot of these conversations have been happening already, where we'll have a chance to really hear about project descriptions, what area those projects are aimed at or outcome areas they're focused on. Are they shorter or longer term investments? And then also the potential costs, which again I heard reiterated, and everyone's hopes and fears. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want to note for the record we've been joined by Jamie Allard.
Should we ask her for a hope and fear?
Sure, yeah, if we want to do that, shall we?
Ask her hope and fear? Yeah. Jamie, welcome. So we're going to put you on the spot right away.
I'm not facilitating this.
So our quick overview is folks have just spent, my name's Shelley, and I'm facilitating the meeting for Acknowledgement Consulting, and so excited to have the opportunity to work with you today. And we went around the room and had all Assembly members and administration share what is their one hope and one fear for today's work session. So something you'd really like to accomplish and something that you would like to avoid. we've done before. Thank you. And with that, having just done a brief overview of the agenda, I think we are ready to transition and hand the baton to you, Jason, to kick us off with this brief understanding of the CARES Act funding. And I also understand that you have maybe some potential examples to share how other municipalities are addressing this.
Yeah, thanks. And I think what I was asked to do was kind of give a basic understanding of the Treasury Guidance and what the rules are around how and where this funding can be spent, and a few thoughts from the administration on that, and then if the group wants, we can certainly kind of run through the actual dollar amounts of all of the different kind of CARES funding that we have been tracking. I think for the most part, the conversation today is centered around the $156 million that we have received. But just so the body knows, there is a significant amount of money in other buckets that we have received and will likely continue to receive over the coming weeks and months. So we'll be happy to do that, but again, don't want to get bogged down in other funding. If that conversation can wait until another day, we're fine with that as well. So starting off with kind of the Treasury Guidance, I think one of the answers that I will give, and it's the answer that I've given for the beginning, is what's an allowable expense, what's an eligible expense in this, and the answer is it depends. The guidance is continually been updated. The original kind of document that they pushed out essentially created a three-pronged test, essentially, to determine if something was eligible to be spent. The first is the expense something that is necessary to respond to the public health or emergency of COVID? And essentially, those are kind of the direct expenses that we are experiencing. But within that, they also said, there are secondary and tertiary expenses that we could pay for, and that is essentially some of the items that the administration and the assembly have already approved, and those range from rental assistance to small business grants, to a jobs program, to child care assistance, those types of things. So those are all what we would say are in direct response to the emergency that we are experiencing. The second prong of that was the costs that we are doing were not budgeted in our most recently approved budget. So again, we never budgeted to push out money for a small business grant. So that is obviously something that does not run afoul of that second prong. And then the third one, based on the guidance, was the costs needed to be something that were incurred between the dates of March 1st, 2020 and December 30th of 2020. So essentially that 9-month period where we are still in. They listed a number of eligible or a non-exclusive list of eligible expenditures that I'm sure folks have read through, but essentially, running through them, they're broad categories of medical expenses, public health expenses, payroll expenses, expenses of actions to facilitate compliance with COVID-19 public health things. So that document obviously was very difficult to kind of decipher. I think that a lot of folks thought it was too narrow when compared to initial guidance with a frequently asked questions document. And when it was first released, it was about 4.5 pages. It's now up to 11. So they have continued to update it and provide additional clarification and additional information on what some of the eligible expenses are. I think the one that I will just kind of talk about today, and I think Alex kind of previewed this yesterday during the Budget and Finance Committee meeting, was the ability of one of the eligible uses of CARES Act funding was to use the funding on the payroll expenses of our public safety and public health departments. And I'll just read a portion of that basically it says the fund is designed to provide ready funding to address unforeseen financial needs and risks. And for this reason, as a matter of administrative convenience, in the light of the emergency nature of this program, a state, territorial, local, tribal government may presume that payroll costs for public health and public safety employees are payments for services to mitigating or responding to the COVID-19 public health emergency, unless the chief executive of the relevant government determines that the specific circumstances indicate otherwise. So let me kind of I guess, describe what our view of that is and where our current thinking is we obviously understand that the CARES Act has put a number of restrictions, both in timing and issues that we can potentially put this money into the community on. So one of the things that we are contemplating is how do we provide additional flexibility to the municipality in how and when this funding needs to go out. What I just read is the way that we are thinking about it, and essentially what that would look like is how we account for the money. Essentially what it would look like is we would put CARES money into the payroll expenses of our public health department, our AFB, APD payroll. And essentially what that would do is it would create a large fund balance. And I think that's the best way for folks here to understand it. It would create a large fund balance for us. But essentially what that would do is create the opportunity to not have the restrictions that are imposed by this, but also, and I think this is the important aspect of this, is it no longer sets us on the timeline of needing to spend every single penny by the end of this year. And I think one of the concerns and one of the reasons why that is somewhat appealing to us is, as Assemblymember Constant said, we don't know what October is going to look like. We don't know what November is going to look like. I think that we are fully expecting that Congress is going to pass another stimulus bill at some point. There are a lot of debate, deliberations going on this. We fully expect that. But without actually having that done, we can't rely on that. And there are a number of federal programs that were designed to help stabilize the economy that are expiring here at the end of this month, and I believe a few more over the next couple of months. So, we want to be able to have the opportunity to be as flexible and nimble as we possibly can. I think one of the other aspects is I think we'll talk about different programs or opportunities that we have to invest that, at least in conversations that we've had, a lot of organizations have said, hey, this is really great. We can spend some of this money by the end of the year, but if we didn't necessarily have a December 30th deadline, we could really use additional funding so that we can kind of spread out and really stabilize our business, our operations beyond December 30th of this year. So that is something that obviously we'll likely talk about more, but that is an area that the administration is say, as I've talked to a few of you about, it's actually somewhat surprising at I would say how unoriginal I think a lot of other jurisdictions are being. A couple of examples that I will talk about. They're only looking at a couple of very narrow categories. I believe San Diego, their money, the vast majority of it is going towards some homelessness-related stuff, small business grants, and that's about it. And it's somewhat surprising that there isn't kind of a larger conversation happening, kind of like I think what we're interested in is how do we kind of ensure that there is more equity in what we're doing and how we're pushing money out. How do we actually try to figure out how to more fully stabilize different segments of the economy, as I think all of us are very interested in doing. So, what we have found is there's very little kind of imagination. As one other that I will just mention, and this is in Alaska city is Juneau, and I'll just kind of run through a couple of their programs on how they're going to more fully spend all of theirs. And again, they're not too different than from what we've already done. They have obviously put a couple $1 million towards child care support. They've put a couple $1 million for business sustainability or small business grants. There's rental assistance. They've obviously done a jobs program. But that's about it. That is kind of the entire list that I have seen from kind of an Alaska community or local government. So with that, I don't know if Alex wants to say anything or correct anything that I said on kind of the accounting or other aspects of what we're doing, but I'm obviously happy to answer any questions or expand on anything if folks have questions throughout the day.
I guess the only thing I will add is just as what Jason's saying is everything that you've been discussing so far and everything that you have allocated currently, obviously we have thoroughly reviewed in relation to the CARES guidelines to know that those are allowable expenses, and even the very point that you've been debating now or hearing about for the last 3 days, can we use this money to buy buildings? And the answer is yeah. And why is that? Well, it's because this administration has done a phenomenal job keeping COVID out of the most vulnerable population by creating space and distance, and the guidance is extraordinarily clear from the federal government. You can spend this money to buy buildings that you will continue to own, that continue to provide that purpose. And so I think, as you've heard, when we put forward this proposition, this is going to create space. We're going to have the ability to separate people. We're going to be able to comply with CDC guidelines, and it is a completely allowable use of the CARES funds. And so I guess I would say that my job, very specifically defined by code, is to comply with the law. So we are not going to do anything in any fashion that does not comply with what the Treasury Guidance has given to us. So I'll stop there.
Just for folks for order.
For a quick point of order, we are actually filtering our questions through Felix, so if everybody through our normal process.
Sweet.
So I know Chris had his hand up earlier too.
Oh, okay, just raise your hands.
It might actually be easier if you all text me because we're farther away, but I'll try to do my best to get everyone. Yeah, so Chris, I think you might have been first.
Yeah. Thank you. It was kind of answered, at least for me, by Lance on the phone or by email. He sent out a spreadsheet and it had all these numbers on it, like many more hundreds of millions of dollars than we've been discussing. And I know Mr. Bacchus had suggested that probably we can talk about those things in another day. And what I'm hoping for, though, is very briefly just describe what that means, because I look at it and I couldn't grasp what we're seeing there. And so it would be nice to have just a preliminary sense of what these categories are, and then we can get that on the table and then put it off to the side once we have some knowledge about what that is.
Sure, I'm happy to run through that document relatively December 30th deadline that the 156 million does. So some of these ESG and CDBG funds, we have 2 years to potentially use those. And I think as we kind of continue to go forward, I think one of the conversations that we've had in relation to the conversation that we've had around the property acquisition is how are we going to pay for the operating dollars for them. And this is specifically one of those areas that we would be pulling operating dollars for, and that is actually what it's designed for. So that is a couple of different ones. I think as you got a brief kind of preview yesterday, we have received almost $18 million in an FAA grant for Merrill Field. Again, that one has, I believe, a 5-year timeline for us to be able to spend, and there will certainly be a lot more work sessions on that and kind of what our and Ralph's kind of vision for rolling that money out over the next couple of years looks like. But it's about $18 million there. It's a little over $156 million. I think that everyone knows the coronavirus relief fund. That's the money that we received from the state. Also on this larger document is the money that we are asking for reimbursement from FEMA. So essentially the emergency appropriations that the Assembly has approved, we've submitted to date a little over $9 million for FEMA reimbursement. So those are for the kind of the direct costs that we are currently expending. And the newest one that has been added to this list is, I think, as many of you know, every single year we get what is called transit dollars, or 5307 funds that the Transit Department receives. Within the CARES Act, there was an additional, I believe, $25 billion put in this nationwide as part of the split between the municipality and the railroad on that money, and that's typically how it's done every single year. We are going to receive a little over $18 million that can be used for transit-related issues. And again, I will likely need to phone a friend and ask Jamie at some point what the timeline on being able to expend those funds, but I believe that it is a longer time period as well. So it's not necessarily we're tied to having to spend all of that by December 30th. I think we have a couple of years as well to ensure the expense of those funds. So that is kind of a very quick, broad overview of those. As we continue to receive or know of other opportunities that we will get, we will certainly update this document and ensure that the Assembly is aware of those different fundings.
Mr. Chair, maybe I read the thing wrong, but it looked like there was a number of $256 million.
I believe the document that I'm looking at says about $210 million. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, thank you.
And when you add all of those up that I've gone through, it
does. Okay, thanks. Spreadsheet, not my spreadsheet. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Austin?
Thanks, Felix. My question is for Alex and potentially for Shudi. So when we all received the request from Julie Soppy, is that how I say her last name? Part of her request, which I thought was cool, was installing some bathrooms and other tourist infrastructure downtown. And I had some dialogue with Chris. What was that? Okay, it's okay. About that, and he thought that we were unable to use the money for that. So can you describe whether that's true, and then if it's true, distinguish that between purchasing buildings or from purchasing?
I will defer to Chris if he can pipe up and talk about her very specific request and how that request is a bit different from what we perceive to be the guidance explicitly for in regards to the purchase of buildings. Chris, are you able to talk?
Can you all hear me?
We can.
Hey, well, technology is an amazing thing. So Jason can speak to the requirements around capital acquisitions as it relates to the CARES Act, specific to the idea idea of public restrooms, that there are a number of other funding opportunities and projects that are in place currently to develop a plan for public restrooms on public properties, including downtown, actually starting in downtown. So in some cases, there are prohibitions on what CARES Act dollars can be spent on, and in other cases, there are existing projects in place currently that are already underway, and it would probably be a disruption to change course and try and adapt to the funding sources. But Jason probably has a copy of the Treasury Guidance, the most recent Treasury Guidance, in front of him, which I don't. And it has the section on what capital acquisitions are acceptable.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. Generally, the kind of capital expenditures are not allowed under the Treasury Guidance. I will kind of try to differentiate kind of between what we are proposing with kind of the ordinance for the property acquisitions, and say that is actually specifically spelled out in the Treasury Guidance as a expenditure that was anticipated by both Congress and the Treasury Department, because they specifically say expenses for the homeless populations to provide to mitigate the COVID-19 effects and enable compliance with public health precautions. So it's very clear on the guidance that was envisioned as something that this money could and should be spent on. I'm not sure, based on the guidance, that it extends all the way to additional kind of capital improvements or investments in areas that don't impact these specific areas. I will come back to kind of my earlier comments that is also, I think, an added advantage of what I was discussing earlier about how we account for the CARES funding, and what bucket we are ultimately pulling from is, if we were to do put the money towards payroll expenses and use general or the fund balance, those types of restrictions wouldn't apply. So we would be able to have kind of the conversation around, does this make sense as something that we actually want to do as a community to improve the function, the livability, and provide those types of resources. So I think we have a couple of options on how to go about doing it, but if we're just looking straight at kind of the Treasury Guidance, that one's a little bit more difficult, I think.
Sure, yeah, so, yeah, sure, we'll do a quick follow-up, then after Austin I have Forrest and Chris, and then I guess just generally I will say, when we get to the discussion on the specific proposals, that may also be another opportunity for us to ask, is this a proposal that we can use with CARES Act funding? But go ahead, Austin.
Thanks. I was just going to ask Shudi, since you said that there are other sources of funding and a plan for that, could you please send us more details? It doesn't need to happen right now because we're talking about CARES Act, but I'd be curious to know what the plans for that are. Thanks.
Exactly.
Thanks. Forrest?
Thank you. I think that, so Austin asked the question I was going to ask, but I think we need a follow-up. So right now we are having a CARES Act discussion, and we're going to put a bunch of ideas on the table, and hopefully there's at least some journalists paying attention to this, or if we release plans, say, here's what we're going to spend on the CARES Act. And let's say it includes a public bathroom downtown as part of this Visit Anchorage proposal. The issue is that in order to resolve some of the legal issues, you're going to have to probably take some of those funds and distribute them instead to police, fire, health, whatever it is, because we have plenty of those expenses, right? And that is legal and legitimate. And so actually, the sort of bucket of money will be this more colorless bucket that will actually be going to that Visit Anchorage proposal, right? And we will all understand that. But the public, I'm worried about the confusion this might cause for the public, because they will say, so wait, did you or did you not spend CARES Act on money? Is this part of your CARES Act plan, or is this something else, right? And so we have to sort of determine, is the message going to be, we took all the CARES Act money and we used it to pay for the fire department, you know, which is sort of a strange thing for us to say, in my opinion. Or is it, we used the CARES Act money, we put a bunch of it towards rental assistance. But the truth is, through accounting, what we actually did was take the CARES Act money, give it to the fire department, and then take this other bucket that was freed up and use that on rental assistance. You see the issue there? And so I guess I'm wondering what your plan is on the messaging and how we communicate this to the public.
I mean, I would say that I think that is absolutely the issue that we would have to, fully communicate what bucket of money we are actually using. I mean, I think generally speaking, I think it would be fair to say we are using CARES money for this, but for as the Treasury Guidance envisions, for administrative convenience and ease of being able to account for these, because again, I'll come back to it. The administration has a lot of responsibilities in submitting reports and how we are spending this. So the Treasury Department has envisioned that to make it easier for local governments around the country to administer and account for this, that this is an easier way that would allow you to free up kind of your general government funds that don't necessarily have the same type of reporting requirements to either the state or the federal government. So absolutely, I think we are going to have to do a very good job of fully communicating this to the public, but ultimately it's something that would likely help us on the administrative side.
So can I make a suggestion then? And this is for all my colleagues, feel free to reject this, and administration too, and I'll try to work on it too. We should probably stop referring to this as a CARES Act plan or something like that. We should start calling it a COVID-19 recovery plan or something like that. That should be the message, because part of it is going to come, it's all ultimately flowing down from these groups of federal funds. But the truth is, the given project we might be talking about at one time might actually be coming from a different revenue source, right? Because of these complicated administrative things you're having to do. And then someone's going to say, oh, you're not actually spending CARES Act money on this, but we heard this was a CARES Act plan. I think that could cause real confusion. The real issue, what we're really trying to do here is respond to the catastrophe that is COVID-19. And so what we're saying is, this is a plan to help for economic recovery in the short term and economic transformation in the long term. This is a plan this is a recovery plan, or this is someone who's more of a wordsmith could help with that. But I think we need to figure out that this is something else. This is not just a CARES Act distribution. This is a more holistic recovery plan for Anchorage.
I'd just say we absolutely agree, because as we've already run through, there are a number of additional funding buckets that are all coming from CARES, but they all do something different. And we absolutely agree with you that we need to come up with a better way to describe what we will ultimately be doing.
Thanks. And so just for the purposes of timeliness, since we started 20 minutes late, I'm basically adjusting the agenda for 20 minutes. So in essence, the agenda is going to go until 4:50. I hope that's okay for you folks. So next I have Chris.
I think that my answers were just generally made, and it does actually beg the question for us to bring somebody on who can help frame up a proposal and our kind of talking points around all of this to make sure we are communicating what we're doing to the public, or what not doing to the public, but doing on behalf of the public. And there are some other capital ideas I'd like to talk about, but we'll get to those later.
Thanks. John?
I think Forrest's point is very good on how we label this, but just moving back on those 5307 funds and what that can be used for. And, I was thinking about the kind of toilets downtown. Bus stops can be improved with toilets, I'm sure. And is there flexibility for that kind of thing within those 5307 funds?
I will inquire of Jamie and see what the kind of broad list of eligible expenses within the 5307 program is.
Okay, and it's a little more in depth. And so we need a new kind of bus station downtown. And I don't know where we are with that, but is that something that those 5307 funds could be used for?
So I'll chime in on that one, Mr. Chairman. This is Chris Schutte, Assemblymember Weddleton. And interestingly enough, the transit station in downtown in the 6th Avenue garage is not owned by transit. It's a leased facility with the Community Development Authority, who's the owner of the garage. So not a 5307 capital project.
Okay, but we're thinking about building a new one or moving it. Right, correct?
So through the chair, Anchorage Community Development Authority has a construction project plan. Yes, it will result in an updated transit leased space, but again, not a 5307 project.
Okay, so that's already being done, so not needed. I guess that's my takeaway there.
Excuse me, thanks. Pete? Also want to note for the record, we've been joined by Suzanne LaFrance.
Thanks, Felix. And so I'm sort of reading between the lines. You said that we would be spending some of the CARES Act money on police and fire, and then that would help to put some money into fund balance. And so, and then the money that we end up with fund balance could be used to make up for some of the revenue that's not coming in because we have fewer people in the hotels and people are driving less, so we're going to get less money from the gas tax and that type of thing. So that's the plan as I understand it. Is that correct?
Generally speaking, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. All right, I don't have anyone else in the queue. Turn it back to Shelley.
Thank you.
So I did want to go ahead and move everybody's attention to the next item on our agenda, which is to start to frame the conversation about how do we organize our thoughts about the different project proposals that we've already heard a little bit about this morning. And also within the parameters of what Jason described as the federal funding guidelines. So to do that, I did want to, if you could please move the slide presentation forward. And so folks that are joining us virtually.
Sorry, Shelley. Sorry. So we do actually have one individual who I wanted to share a brief bit. I know we're over scheduled, so I apologize.
Yeah.
That's how this group works. I have Tiffany Hall, who is here to talk a little bit about the opportunities to leverage with other sources. And then I just want to double check. Diane Kaplan, are you with us as well? Okay. All right, so Tiffany, if you can go ahead and share, particularly when it comes to the alcohol tax funding, some of your thoughts in regards to leveraging with other resources.
Can y'all hear me? Hi there, this is Tiffany.
You can hear me.
Okay, great. I wasn't sure how many mutes I was on. Thanks very much for the invitation and the opportunity to speak with y'all today. I'm not positive, so just to say, I am the executive director of Recover Alaska. We work to reduce excessive alcohol use and harms across the state. And after the alcohol tax passed, we have been working with a large number of other organizations on what the alcohol tax tax revenue could potentially be used for. We started that work with the Children's Trust and Dick Monsager, who's the Senior Fellow at Rasmussen Foundation, as a member of the Homelessness Leadership Council. And we have invited as many people as possible to come and join us in that work, subject matter experts across the kind of three bucket areas of the alcohol tax revenue, which is essentially public safety, prevention of domestic violence, sexual assault, and child abuse. And then the third being homelessness services, substance use disorder treatment, and mental health services. And we started with about 100 people, and very quickly, within a week, they had forwarded, so now our list is about 250 people who have been participating in some form or another with this process. We have presented to the Assembly in various committees, and we know that you're going to have a work session on that funding on the 24th, and so we are working really hard to get some more solid recommendations, some more specifics to you all. And so I have a very draft form of that. I have not yet shared it with you. I just kind of got an updated version late last night. If you want, I can try to share screen or just talk through it a little bit. But essentially, our work has been trying to create a theory of change and a logic model as a framework through which we view how the tax revenue should be spent. And so it looks at those three buckets I mentioned earlier, but it also tries to incorporate things like equity and making sure that we're being really trauma informed and looking upstream to address root causes of some of the things that are addressed by the three buckets.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm actually wondering if you could just, and sorry to be rude, but if you could just get closer to the question that I was asking, because a lot of us have heard this information already. Sorry.
Okay, great. No, thank you. I appreciate that. So what we have now, we have a list of kind of the priorities that we've heard from people, and we're trying to identify which ones could qualify for CARES Act funding. And I think some of the primary things that have risen to the top include some things you've already heard and talked about, including...
Oh, we lost you.
Programming.
There we go.
Uh-oh.
You're back.
You can hear me again? Great. So I think either transitional or rapid rehousing, rental assistance programs, mental health programs, especially in schools, whether that be through mental health curriculum or figuring out what, if school was to be partially done virtually. I know we just saw an update from ASD that looks like it won't be done virtually, but to just try to figure out what additional mental health needs are in schools, trauma support for folks on the front lines who are dealing with the impacts of COVID-19, as well as, well, so I guess in dealing directly themselves with it or dealing with the higher rates that are associated with COVID-19. I'm looking through our list. And then a lot of the homelessness services that you mentioned in terms of the buildings, we are definitely hoping that CARES Act can be leveraged to operate there. It's difficult to speak on behalf of this really large group because we're still working with them to get the priorities, and so I don't want to kind of misspeak and misrepresent what they've been working on, but those ones I listed are probably the non-police response to behavioral health crises is something else that has risen to the top.
Great. Thank you so much, Tiffany. All right, since we don't have Diane here, I'll see if she maybe has an updated list, but I did send an email not that long ago from Diane of all the different things that she has put together in regards of the different funders and what they are funding. So if I have an updated list of that, I'll send that to the members. back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Felix. And I think the point of that was that last bullet in the under the CARES Act funding overview in the agenda, which is to just acknowledge and not ignore the fact that there's a lot of opportunity here to leverage with other sources. So that includes not only the alcohol tax funding, but other public funds and private funding investments that are happening. And so how do we keep ourselves informed of that as you begin this process of thinking about this particular funding allocation? So with that, I think that does officially take us to a proposed or the draft framework itself. So everyone should have it up on the screen here, and folks that are sharing the screen virtually, but also we do have printed copies for folks in the room, so big versions of the draft framework. So let me just first introduce the framework just in terms of how this was developed. So certainly this was developed by understanding previous conversations that you've had about how you might go through a process of prioritizing different proposals and project ideas. And so as a team, we looked at those previous meeting notes and looked at some of the draft prioritization that you'd already done, and also just how to best organize and what the criteria might look like for doing the allocation piece. And so that's what you have in front of you, is this idea of we need some process and framework for, as the ideas come forward, how do we begin the process of organizing them and putting them into these different buckets. And so the idea for today in this first part of our conversation is to really walk through this framework and make sure that we're on track with the right kind of parameters and potential criteria for guiding your process. So whatever that project is that is presented later this afternoon, how do we then measure that project up to what is our ultimate goal or framework for identifying whether that's a priority and which bucket it fits into. So I might just begin at the very top here, and so if folks can see at the top, and I don't know, Felix or Cameron, if you guys wanted to add anything into how the framework was developed.
Actually, maybe Cameron, I will ask him to do that, but for really quick, for the public who is on our phone line, you can also view this document with us if you go to the Assembly website, www.muni.org, go to the Assembly website, and then click on the Assembly Work Sessions tab. You will find the 3 documents that we had working off of for today. And then I'll turn it over to Cameron.
Thank you. And I would just encourage the clerk's staff that when that's on the website to just put in big letters draft on there, because that's one of the main comments I wanted to make, is that my understanding is that this was developed as a real draft, and that it's intended that the outcome areas, if these are wrong, if there's something missing, we need to add it, right? That these are not in any way solid, and that even in the short term, long term, those are just sort of examples. So it's intended that we would have a conversation about what do we mean by short term, what do we mean by long term? Is that what we collectively mean by those two things? And then the guiding principles, again, just ideas based on previous conversations. But if there are things that are really important, that as we move forward and as we're making the decisions, whether it's in our small groups, work groups, or as a large group, that we're all sort of thinking about the same kinds of things that we've agreed upon in terms of what should be guiding us throughout. And so I would just really encourage us to attack this a bit and go, wait a minute, there's something missing here, or there's something we really need, that this is really a draft. And so once we get to that stage, it would be really great to go through these and give members an opportunity to say, yeah, I really want one of our guiding principles to be X. Mm-hmm. Because when me and Meg and Suzanne are in a group coming up with an idea about how we're going to sort of do a proposal, I'd like us to be able to look at this and go, okay, so is it falling within some of the guidelines that we talked about? Is it it doesn't have to be, but it's sort of a guide. So that's my idea in terms of how this might work. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Cameron. And so we are at that point. And so this is now the opportunity to start to ask the question, do these outcome areas and the other pieces of this framework, do those resonate? Are they the right ones? So the idea, yes, there's a question.
So didn't we do this in a previous, I mean, you've given us some ratings, some other things, so I guess I just want to take this and match it with the other work we've already done and just know where those two things align.
Yeah, that's what created this.
Yeah. So this is the mashup of sorts. So this includes some of those details about different levels of investments and also some of the guiding principles or broad criteria that you would use to organize your thinking and to do the prioritization process. So
yeah, and I guess just to clarify a little bit on that. So and I see a couple more folks in the queue. So I'm going to go through the two folks that I have in the queue after I'm done speaking. So yeah, one of the reasons that we came up with this document first is, I gave we went through all of the previous meeting notes and like Shelley and Cameron said, sort of matched all of this up. But also wanted to acknowledge that in those previous meeting notes, we also had members who said, I'm not sure I agree with this framework. I'm not sure this is the way that we want to go. So this is our opportunity to say, once again, I'm not sure, but more than I'm not sure, okay, then what should it look like? So with that, I'll go ahead and go to Forrest.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I agree with what Cameron said, so long as I interpreted him correctly. I appreciate these priorities. I think this is a good document. It breaks things down to short-term and long-term, which is how I'm viewing this challenge. But regardless of what happens today, we have to appropriate this money over the course of the next however many months, perhaps years if we are dealing with certain other forms of this funding. And we all reserve the right to offer an amendment even on the day of, on the floor, to say, you know what, it turns out we really need to do this other thing, And so that is our right as elected officials, and our duty, I would say, as elected officials. So I like this framework. I think it's going to help us drive us to today. But I think we're all on the same page that we are in no way bound by this. We are just trying to be guided by it.
Yep, so I want to acknowledge that comment and say that I said that exact thing to Cameron and to Shelley when we were organizing this. That this is not something that is meant to cage us as elected officials, but mainly, as Cameron said, as guidelines. And guidelines are things that sometimes you can ignore if you want. So
that really depends on the context.
Sure.
Were there other people on your queue?
Yeah, John.
So looking at this, and I'm looking back at some of the documents we had before, and I think missing from these categories, or maybe they become subcategories, are child care, and then we had food security as a category, institutional supports, and sort of, I wrote down contingency, and that's, kind of keeping some money aside in case something totally new happens in the next 2, 3, 4, 6, 8 months or whatever. So where would those be in this? I'm looking at the outcome areas, and those seem to be missing.
Yeah, and I guess sort of a question, sort of process-wise. Shelley, how do you want us to capture the comments that are being made? Because we have all of this here, and
so I'm both simultaneously doing a couple notes here, but I will, since we're going to start to, it sounds like folks are ready to segue into the actual, let's pick this thing apart. Okay, so I'm with you, and so I might transition right behind you, Felix, so I can capture stuff up on the flow charts. But I wanted to get back to John's point. I think the child care, so if you look back at those original notes, and there's like you said, child care, and I think also food and institutional supports were some of the things that I saw at the bottom of that list. And so if that was either working groups or if that was actual outcome areas, I think is maybe the discussion. And so I can capture those things, but I had maybe rolled those categories into these broader topics or outcome areas of health that could potentially cover. So childcare, I feel like could fall into the health umbrella or the employment umbrella or a number of other arenas. So, but I'm going to capture though, and what I'm hearing though is we'd like to see childcare, but I'm thinking also that that might be a very specific example of a project idea. Yeah, it looks like.
Yeah, I just want to chime in. It's okay.
Actually, sorry. I have Forrest, and then I'll go to Kilgore.
Okay.
I'll defer to Mr. Fred if he wants to go first.
Go ahead.
Oh, just as a process note, and because I think that you're right, that there's interconnectedness between all of these. There are subcategories, but I do think just to capture some of these subcategories, so we don't lose them,
Yes.
whether they roll up or not. And so I think that that's a really helpful piece to say childcare, food security, institutional supports as just subcategories. I don't think we have to place them at this point, but just capturing them so we know that those are outcome priority areas.
And I want to also clarify before I go to you, Forrest. So I think the last meeting when we had talked about institutional supports, we had actually flipped that term to municipal response, I believe is what we flipped that term to. So John, you might be looking at an old version. Forrest.
Thank you. And I agree with Mr. Frederick with regard to food security and institutional supports, or what we're now calling municipal response. I'm sort of torn on childcare because it does clearly represent so many others, touch so many others, but it's also sort of like homelessness to me. I mean, it's something that is more specific than the other categories, but also such a large portion of what a lot of us are seeing that childcare might actually deserve its own box. But that one I'm torn on. The one I'm not torn on, and it was something I think that Mr. Constant surfaced first, and I have since come around to, is this idea of a contingency fund of some kind. I don't think it cleanly fits in any of those boxes, and I think it's worth another box. Now, we might end up deciding it's not a box we want to fill, but I think it's a box that should be up there, and I think I've heard Ms. Solomon say something similar to, I agree with this statement. But I think that contingency is something that, that deserves some box. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Meg?
Yeah, I wanted to either maybe put in a sub-box or a subcategory on municipal response, specifically for the assembly. We haven't really talked about it, but I think it's important that we talk about the impact of COVID on the work that we're doing as elected officials, our capacity, and the capacity of our staff, both the clerk's office and Dean. Oh my goodness, poor Dean right now. Because if we want to do our work well, we have to have the capacity to do it. So I really want to make sure we're capturing that as a sub area or an emphasis area in that category. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody else in your queue? No? Okay, so just to capture for folks that are on the phone that cannot see me writing on this flip chart here. So other categories, again, without getting into the weeds, so I really appreciate the level of the conversation right now because we're brainstorming and we're thinking about things that might be missing from these initial outcome areas. And so again, as a draft, what might be missing that we should consider as either roll-up or component or childcare, food security, and then what I was hearing you say, Felix, and I just wanted to confirm that I was hearing this correctly, that what you had discussed at your last meeting about institutional, is that potentially this municipal response piece? Okay, so some form of municipal response, and then contingency funds that might have its own special box. Other items that might be missing or comments related to these outcome areas. Okay. Seeing that and hearing that in the room, you're not getting any text, Felix. Okay. Okay. So I think that takes us to the next tier in the framework, which is the idea that you would consider at some level the sort of level of urgency for a particular project. And so in doing that, what are some of the short-term or longer-term or transformative investments that you might make, and how do you define those things? So we'll start with that short-term box, which is currently defined as by a specific set of questions. And those questions that we have posed preliminarily are, what are the immediate needs or COVID-19 related impacts, and what do we need to respond to right now? So those are the guiding questions that would help determine if you had a project in front of you. Is that a short-term investment? Is that something we need to respond to immediately? It has a high sense of urgency. So that's sort of how we're defining potential short-term investments, at least preliminarily. And I did see back in some of your notes some conversation about how some projects might be both short-term and long-term investments, so I appreciate that. That said, we've taken a first pass at, again, bringing all of your previous work together and thinking about what do we mean when we say long-term or transformative. And there's a little year plus sign up there. You can ignore that. It's just we're thinking like something that's longer term. And so what are those things and how do we define that? Those could potentially be defined by these questions. What are the longer term systemic changes that we really want to make? The broader question of how can we make the municipality a better place for all in the future? But these are, like, again, not immediate needs. How can we tie to existing either municipal or partner plans and priorities? So the one thing I did look at in preparation for this meeting today was your 2019 to 2021 priorities and just, of course, your longer term plans. So is there an opportunity as you're thinking about longer term investments, again, to tie to these other plans? And then last, what activities focus on prevention, sustainability, and are most strategic in the longer term? So that's broadly how we're defining through a series of questions when you're seeing, again, project proposals in front of you. Is this really a short-term investment or a longer-term investment that could have a longer, more systemic impact? So I'm excited to get any questions or comments that the Assembly has on those ideas right now. See a question here.
Cameron.
So yeah, I just wanted to reinforce that the reason I like this is because it creates some common language for us to use, and that when I'm talking about the proposal that I have, I think often they're going to be a combination, but to be able to use that language and be able to say, here's the work that really has to happen right now. I mean, this is an immediate need, we need to address it, but it has a sort of a long-term impact as well. So I like it because it creates, even though it's not perfect, there's going to be things that don't fit exactly. It's kind of short term, it's kind of long term, it's sort of in the middle. I think it's helpful to have this as just language so that we could be using it in describing the work that we're doing. So I just want to make that comment, that it's helpful to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. And then was there someone else that I missed? Meg.
Thanks. Under the short term, I guess I want to somehow capture what changes or deadlines that are out of our control are coming up. You know, we keep talking about like the end of the federal unemployment bump. So those types of things, I want us to be, letting those help drive our urgency if there's something out of our control. I mean, it may go into the immediate needs, but I really want to flag us to kind of scan for those things. Thanks.
Thanks. Any other thoughts, additions? Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so that then takes us to this next tier on the framework. And you can see on the visual here, we sort of have this idea that, again, many project ideas we've already heard about some this morning. They're over here in this left-hand column or this box here. And to really have the thought process and to implement this framework, you would again be thinking about short and long-term investment or need. But you need some mechanism for prioritizing beyond that. And so that's what we have in front of you here is a proposed set of guiding principles. Or you could also consider those as our criteria for focusing and prioritizing ideas. So the idea would be you would say, okay, here's this project idea, project XYZ. That proposal or that idea to sort of elevate it to the top should be needs-based. So it will aid the most vulnerable populations or those disparately impacted by COVID-19. So it's one of those potential criteria for assessing where or how that project lands or gets allocated funding. That proposal or idea or project idea should leverage and align with other investments. So we've talked about that in the long-term box, but of course it could have implications for short-term needs as well. The proposal or the idea should have a community-wide impact. And then last in that criteria is this proposal or idea or project idea really increases access to resources. So more specifically stated, residents can more effectively and efficiently get what they need. so that access is more immediate, more effective, more efficient. So there's a shorter line between the need and someone getting that need met. So that is a set of potential guiding principles that you can see. I think our screen's getting cut off a little bit here to the right, but that would land us with this potential suite of priorities that are in sort of the short-term box or long-term box, or they could be in both. And then we did have a little say, thank you. That was magical. And then the bottom is like maybe some are not priorities and are just ideas for further consideration at some other point in time. But I'm excited to hear what Assembly members think or have to say about this preliminary set of guiding principles.
And I'm not near my phone, so John or Pete, if you're texting me, I don't see it.
Go ahead,
So I'm just going to jump in and add because I think that my hope is that we do some addition to this. That this is these are really just sort of things that are thrown out there based on previous conversations, and I'm excited to hear some of the ideas that people have. And in my mind, just practically, I think about this as it would hopefully be useful, right? So that it's something for me to look at as I'm looking at the projects that I'm considering. And also that I know that I'm not going to be in those planning meetings of other people. And so it helps me to think about it, because I'm not in those meetings, some things I hope that they would consider as they're thinking through their projects. I would just hope that these would be things that they would at least talk about, whether they actually met them or not. At least it's something for them to consider. So that's how I see this. My mind should be very practical and useful and not vague at all. It should be something that we can use. So I'm looking forward to hearing some thoughts from the members on this.
Yeah. So I wanted to acknowledge the inherent tension with some of these. So, for example, the first priority, aid the most vulnerable population, those disparately impacted. And then you look at the third priority, have a community-wide impact. Those are sometimes aligned, but often not.
Yeah.
Right? And that's sort of the whole point of the first priority. There are going to be specific times where we say, this person, this group of people, this organization, they have been devastated by this in a way that is unique. And so we're going to be more targeted in our funding.
Thank you. Other comments?
Meg?
That's a really good point for us. I was not really too quick. Really good point for us. But community-wide impact, I'm wondering if that, to put a finer point on it, that it's we're being needs-based about COVID across the municipality. Because I think that's really maybe what we're trying to drive at, is that we're being equitable and really thinking through the entire municipality, and that we should keep that conversation municipal-wide instead of saying Anchorage. Let's talk about the municipality. And I know we did get something specific from Girdwood and something from Eagle River to get, but as we think about this, let's make sure we're being inclusive. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in just because I think it's time to do that. But I think there's two separate things, because I think what you're talking about is really important to be thinking about that sort of how broad it is. When I saw that, I thought about our conversation with the economist in terms of our strategic use of the funds. And so, how do we invest them strategically so that they actually have a ripple effect, and that there are positive consequences that come from that, and how we can make smart investments as opposed to, and I remember one of the economists said, that if you're going to invest in businesses, think about whether that's a viable business or not, and those kinds of things. So that was my interpretation of this sort of strategic thinking about the investments. So I see those as two separate things.
Yeah, thank you.
So I had an emergency call. Can you just rephrase the question for me?
Sure thing. So we are focusing on this, on the third tier of the framework, and specifically the guiding principles, as potentially a suite of criteria. I have to breathe for just a second. As potentially a set of criteria for focusing and prioritizing ideas. So what has happened so far is we had this initial set, and what Forrest and Meg and Cameron have been discussing is that there's potentially some tension between this first one, where you're really focusing on the most vulnerable populations, and this third check of having a community-wide impact. There can be a tension between those two things. So I think it was really helpful, Meg, to hear you sort of redefine that as sort of like a geographic equity, so that you are ensuring that there is attention and distribution of funds equitably spread across the municipality. And then Cameron, you were adding a nuance to that, which was that really it's also about investing strategically, so there's a ripple effect. So there's a positive community impact, so community-wide. And so the question is, Chris, to your point, is are there other ideas or criteria that you need to articulate more clearly to define the criteria?
Yeah, thank you. The only one so far that's come to mind separate from these is that there are some targeted investments to maintain key infrastructure or community assets. This isn't Anchorage, so I'll use it not as an example of what I would like to have on a list, but just you've heard recently that the Sea Life Center may shut down because there's no money and no one there. And so there are probably some targeted investments to make infrastructure that might not meet any of these criteria, but are worthy of contemplating. So it's ensuring that certain infrastructure elements are maintained.
Thanks. Yeah, and so three things then. So first is we have Nolan Clouda on the line if anyone wants to ask him questions. I heard Cameron bring up the economist, so the economist is with us. Second is I have Mr. Weddleton in the queue. But before I get to you, Mr. Weddleton, want to acknowledge, even though Crystal isn't here today, the comment that Chris just made echoes something that I heard Crystal say in a prior meeting. John.
Oh, thanks. And actually, the zoo popped into mind when Chris said that. But I guess we're getting toward vulnerable population. I don't know if we've defined that. And then another, I don't know if it's a guiding principle, but something to keep in mind too is what other sources of dollars are there for any particular group. It's like we're worried. The unemployment is quite high right now, which you get paid, but that's going to run out, and then the issue with moratorium on rent evictions and so on. But then businesses get PPP, which is really just to cover payroll, which is kind of goes straight to employees and so on. But there are other sources of money, and I don't know who we have as an expert on that to keep an eye on that. But if we're funding something that's already funded by another federal program, that's probably not something we should do, or even the state. I don't know what the state's doing with their bucket, but it is, I don't know, Jason or Alex, are you guys paying attention to other sources, or is there something you could send us that outlines that?
Through the chair, this is Alex. We are working together to gather that information. I think you've seen some of it already in terms of the actual uptake in need for rental assistance, but we are trying to track that closely to make sure that we meet your objective.
And through the chair, this is Chris Schutte. I will add that in addition to that, Mr. Weddleton, through our involvement in national organizations like the National League of Cities and Urban Land Institute, there is a robust network of cities that are sharing this kind of information across borders. So we have pretty good visibility into what's happening within the state, what's happening within cities within our state, and then what's happening within cities across the country.
Okay. Hey, if I could just a moment, Chair.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So there's something that, and I've been fairly involved with this, but the Small Business Administration is making it extremely easy to get loans of various sizes for business that are 30-year loans, and I don't know, there's something like roughly 3% interest, which is ridiculously low, really, in this world. And but that said, I don't know how well, Chris, are you aware of the extent of those loans and what the cap is? I mean, they're really pushing this money to get businesses. You don't really know
on the phone, and I don't know if John Bittner from SPDC is on the phone as well, but it's something that we're tracking closely. And we're trying to provide you some snapshots of those impacts in the weekly assembly updates that we're sending in.
Okay, that's good. And for my peers, my concern is businesses are going to fail. We want to protect those, but we go, well, who wouldn't have failed anyway? And that kind of question. But there is a surprising amount of money out there for business. And my sense is, how do you pick the winners and losers of businesses? If customers have money, they'll make that decision for us. So I'm kind of my thought process going that way, that money for rent assistance and things like that help people support businesses ultimately. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, I see Meg. Before I get to Meg, I actually want to turn to the administration and we'll invite any of the three members of the administration to respond. So I'm just curious, so the various proposals that you brought forward and that you are considering, how do they align with these guiding principles? And then I think some of that's pretty obvious, but we'd love to get your thoughts on that. And then, do you think that there are any guiding principles that are up here that are maybe missing from the administration's perspective?
I'll go first since I don't hear anybody talking. This is Chris Schutte. So through the chair, I think that this framework that you developed with Acknowledgement is very informative, very helpful. And while we don't have anything quite as pretty, it actually kind of mirrors the way that the administration has looked at and thought about the impact of COVID in the community and how CARES Act funding of all buckets can help achieve the outcomes that we're all working towards. In the areas of outcome areas, you have seen and approved some initial CARES Act funded disbursements that touch on at least half of them. And by the time we get through all of this together, I believe we will have touched on all of them. On the guiding principles, the only other one that I know we talk about and think about at the administration that I don't see articulated, but I believe that you are implying, is that another guiding principle should be support that sustains the community past COVID. So put another way, the impact of what we're doing now through these various proposals, one of the guiding principles that we look at is how is it setting up the community or the affected constituency to be successful past COVID as well, not just get through COVID. Thank you.
Chris said everything that I was going to say.
And I was just going to jump in really quick, because I think your first question was like, how does the administration's proposals align with this framework? And that's, I think, a question for later when we actually hear about those proposals. But really appreciate Chris's adding to the guiding principles. Alex, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Chris said it all.
Okay, Chris, you said it all.
Hey, Shelley.
So I have two more folks.
Yep.
Sorry.
Go for it.
We're in direct response to that. Can I just directly say something else? I guess I just want to push you a little bit on Chris and the rest of the administration on this. So imagine that there's a group of us in a room who are coming up with a proposal, and you want to make sure that we're thinking through the things that are important to you as the people who are actually going to have to implement it. Is there anything not up there that you'd like us to make sure that we're thinking about when we're in that room and we're having conversations around our plans? And I would assume one of them would be the viability of our ability to actually do it. I mean, I don't know, I don't have those kinds of words, but are there anything up there that you want to make sure that we're thinking about as we're coming up with these proposals that we're bringing forward? So I just want to prompt you up again.
So through the chair, this is Chris. I really like, if it was you or someone else that said it while you were speaking, the term feasibility. That is something that is very hard for us to get our arms around as a community. What can we do? What is feasible to do within the somewhat strict boundaries that Treasury has laid out for CARES Act funding? Mr. Bach Seth did a great job of articulating those. I would think that that's one that we are all as a community finding to be the most difficult part of this conversation. How can we turn these things on quickly in a way that we know will be effective and still conform to the criteria laid out by Treasury? Thank you.
And I would just add on to the kind of the last piece where I think Chris was going. I think one of the things that we have been thinking about, and I would just encourage, is we have to implement this. So to the extent that whatever the proposals are that we come up can be targeted but broad at the same time, I know that can be somewhat difficult probably, but in terms of implementing it and actually, getting to what the intent behind the money is super important because, sometimes we're left going, said why here, but we can interpret it a couple of different ways, and how should we target it? So, to the extent that, as we get into kind of more the details of each of the proposals, making sure that there's enough flexibility for us to implement it as quickly as possible, because I think that's kind of been the common theme. If there's a proposal, we want to make sure it gets out there, but the more kind of issues that are raised around it, the harder it is for us to kind of move that quickly. So that's all I would add to that.
Alex, did you have something you wanted to add?
I was just going to reiterate what Jason had shared with you earlier, that 2 points. That one, that we pretty much are in alignment. What you're talking about are the same things. Those are the same priorities that this administration has. And I'll repeat what I said this morning. We will be able to spend all this money by the end of the year. And as Jason outlined, it will be in compliance with Treasury Guidance, and it will most likely result in a fund balance in excess of our current 10 and 2% policy. So I guess I would highlight, you're talking about a contingency. We know that there will be, based on Treasury Guidance, we'll have fund balance left over that we won't have, we will have been able to spend all the CARES money, but as Forrest correctly outlined, this is a COVID recovery plan, and it's going to carry on beyond this year. So I just remind you that think about things that we can implement, but that we will be able to spend. We will be able to access all of these CARES funds, and as Jason said, it should extend beyond this year, our ability to use them.
Thanks. So I have 2 folks in the queue, Meg and John.
Thanks, Felix. 2 things. One was back to John's comments about applying for SBA loans and the like. I think we need to be cognizant and very conscious that those programs have inequities built into them. So if we're thinking, if you're a small business, you should just be able to go get an SBA loan, let's really dig down into that idea. If that's where we're thinking that particular issue is taken care of, for maybe there is a gap or something we need to more specifically target. So that kind of pulls in racial equity and some of the other issues. I think we saw that very early on with some of the PPP and EIDL funding. Similarly, on the guiding principles, I think it's worth highlighting what Jason has mentioned about the administration of these programs. I think a guiding principle, particularly if you're going towards the urgent category, should be scaling of existing programs, administrative costs, and rollout time. Because if it's going to take a year to roll something out, that's not going to be terribly helpful, maybe. And we've seen, even with rental assistance, the rollout time for the initial setup was, I think, longer than a lot of us expected. And I think even with the child care grants, when we saw the AHD implementation scheme, it was maybe more complex than we were expecting. So it's just something I think we should keep at front of mind. Thank you.
John?
Oh, thanks. I had a comment on Meg's point. You know, the PPP, some people tripped over, and I thought it was fairly simple, but this SBA loan is shockingly easy. There may be inequities, but it's very unusually, anyway, it's money growing on trees almost. One of the guiding principles, I think, maybe it should be at the very top, is not enough. You know, with all these different things, there simply won't be enough money to make COVID-19 not painful for people. And then just understand that as we go forward.
Thanks, John. Nolan wanted to comment. Nolan?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I did want to weigh in on the issue of the business loans and relief programs. And you know, I realize Mr. Weddleton's obviously both an economist and a business owner, so he knows a lot about, you know, what this looks like from both perspectives. But a couple things I'd add though. One is that, you know, PPP is great, but I think a lot of businesses received it and are still in trouble. And PPP was better at helping businesses preserve their employee headcount for a fixed period of time than it is for really helping the business with some of its operating consequences beyond that. And also the EIDLE program, you know, the economic injury disaster loan that was not terribly well funded at the national level to the scale that it can really backfill remaining need after PPP. Businesses can get both. They can't claim the same expenses with both, of course, but it's been oversubscribed and businesses really haven't been able to get it as a loan. It does have great terms, but it's got way more demand for it than it can actually meet. They have been able to put out their loan advances, which it's really a grant, but most of those are just a few $1,000s. A lot of businesses have been able to get that, but it still doesn't come close to keeping them solvent if they're really in trouble. So the need for business relief, I think, is still pretty enormous, even with PPP EIDLE. There are some other programs out there that offer, you know, pretty loan terms, but I still don't think it's quite enough. And according to some of the most recent data on it, it's still over 30% of businesses in Alaska right now that are closed. And I can share a source of information on that for you. But compared to January before the outbreak, so businesses are in a lot of trouble, and this is something that does keep me awake at night. Is what happens to how many businesses permanently close, and a closed business has no capacity to rehire people, leaves us with very long-term unemployment and large unemployment. So that's a very real concern for me. So I have been in favor of additional relief for business programs fairly extensive terms. Thank you.
Thanks. Next I have Chris.
Thank you. And so while we reframe the conversation to a more broad COVID recovery planning conversation, I agree with Mr. Weddleton that I think we do need to, in that messaging process, clearly state that there isn't enough money under this, but there are things different than money that we need to also be looking at. And what comes to mind are policy shifts that aid in transforming the way business is done. And what comes to mind specifically is the work that's been done to allow certain businesses to operate in the streets or expand the footing of their restaurants so they can serve people outside. And I'm not sure how we get to kind of a creative conversation. Who can help us lead that? Do other policy changes that can be made to facilitate the opening of those 30% of other businesses to make it so that people are safe and willing to go back? And I actually had some people propose, Mr. Schutte, to me that we start looking at our building codes to promote changes to touchless entry to businesses as a building code requirement in certain methodologies. And so, separate from the money conversation, this is probably for another day, we need to add to the table, COVID recovery also requires us to invest, and there could be our investments that we need to make to facilitate the changes in the marketplaces so people can do their business.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I want to acknowledge that's definitely been a part of my thinking process, and sometimes we'll figure out how to incorporate that, but we'll make it work. Okay, I don't see anyone else.
Okay. Okay, so I actually believe we're going to be ahead of schedule if there are no additional comments on the framework. I do want to summarize several of the key points that folks have shared on the guiding principles that I haven't yet had a chance to summarize, and I think that begins with John's first comment here about the targeted investments in infrastructure, so that is a potential consideration. We've also heard folks talk in different ways about, we did have leverage in line with other investments, but what wasn't articulated there was this idea of considering, what are the other federal programs that are happening and those other investments where there might be potential gaps or built-in inequities. So there's an opportunity there to assess where the PPP might not be doing its thing, where there's an opportunity through this funding or through the COVID-19 recovery plan. And then the idea that there's a potential here to do supports or criteria there are supports that would sustain the community beyond COVID-19. We also heard folks talk about the proposals, potentially a criteria should and could be feasibility or the viability of a project. So that in more detail, that the projects are targeted but broad, but also consider the implementation implications. So there's enough flexibility built in so that you can implement as quickly as possible and really understand the rollout time and administrative burden of doing that. And then last, the other things that folks were sharing is, regarding messaging. And so this is not enough to do everything. And so considering what are the most strategic investments with the funding that you have available. And then I just put up on the board here again, because I've heard several folks reiterate the fact that we're talking about, a COVID-19 recovery plan in broader terms versus just CARES Act funding proposals or allocations. What am I missing that folks would like to articulate or share, or concerns that you have about the framework as a whole? So this could be a time for any other comments on any piece of this framework, because we're about to transition. We're going to take a break, and then we get to do the exciting stuff, which is to come back and start to talk about the real stuff. So what are those projects and proposals? And we're going to hear from each assembly member what he or she would like to contribute to that conversation. We'll hear from the administration as well. So other comments or questions, folks? Yeah, go ahead, Cameron.
This is a little bit obvious, but I just based on the last few days, certainly I think, considering sort of current data and public comment, public concern, I think those are things obviously we always can consider, but I think it's just good to put it up there that we're looking at current data to make these choices, and that we're considering public input throughout the entire process. Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, and I want to touch on that a little bit. Funny that you were saying that, because I'm looking at the Facebook Live feed just to see if we're getting any interesting comments or questions. So far, nothing. But if folks want to share that feed with their followers, I'm going to keep checking it. And for folks who are listening, feel free to add any insightful comments or questions that you might have. And then also want to state that it's the intent, at least my hope and intent, that the work products that we come out of this meeting is something that we will eventually be able to take forward to the public, whether it's some type of public hearing process or something maybe less formal, so that we can really hear from the public at large about what do you think? Are we in the right direction? So that's my only comments. I don't have anyone else, but it looks like Chris wants to talk.
Yeah, actually, that sparked memory for me. I think even before we have any kind of formal public process, we ought to contemplate crafting effectively a website of what I would classify as an RFI or request for input, that we formalize some of this framework. So this is how we're thinking about it. Tell us what you think we should be investing in. And then spend a lot of money and time, all of us, shouting out to the public, please tell us your thoughts as soon as you can. And so then we can, almost like a public comment period on the document, have a comment table that we can sort through and then reflect on our thoughts and our perspectives and what the public is saying. It might help us do that. And I think that could be done pretty quickly. A page on our website, a survey to fill out, and then we could begin that process that would lead us to a point where we're able to meet with them.
Agreed, and that's actually something on my list of something to talk about later, but I totally agree, Chris. Okay. I'm not seeing any other thoughts, so
Great.
looks like we are good. Thanks.
Okay. So I think what we'll do is take a 15-minute break, and that will give us a nice 30-minute solid contributions opportunity. And so we'll go from 11:30 to noon, and then, am I understanding correctly that food is coming in here? Is that, okay. So lunch is here at 12 o'clock, and so we're going to take a break, but just maybe as a quick reminder as you're exiting, that the idea, so a lot of really great input on how to refine and continue to refine the framework, so we can certainly provide a refined version of this as an output from today's meeting, but also the recognition between Cameron and I think Forrest both articulated that this is could be challenged and revised and refined as you go through this process, and especially as you get more detail and look at project proposals and ideas. So just wanted to reiterate that we will definitely take this and refresh it and share that back with you. So with that, 15-minute break. We'll see you back here at 11:30. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we started about 11:30? Yeah, it's actually
pre-meeting of like, 12 different groups or whatever.
The piece I'm worried that we're not gonna capture, because I didn't really have the presentation, is how we're gonna capture the detail points. Because I'm gonna say them, but.
I'm gonna do detailed notes.
Because then I have follow-up links. Because some of it's like, oh, hey, it's happened here, look here, or here's this report. But I didn't have time to compile all of that.
Yeah, and that's okay. I mean, this
I
is
have like
process.
15 tabs open on my.
You know, like, I had the idea, you developed it, so that I could have it, like, have it, you know, but, all of these, we have 10 times our whole.
I feel like we have. I didn't come back. I said we. Well, I emailed them on okay.
But it doesn't have to get help, we need, not about them.
I know.
Not about them,
So let's add in the,
I hate it, but, no. He can then bring forward to the body and say, this is what I want, and we will defer to each other. Like, you're not a big enough, I can search my neighborhood for investments. That's like the 1.5 million, and so just but by population, it's fine. If we do it, no idea, I mean, but still, it's for our priorities. You know,
but my priority is
that might be good. Let's make anchors less straight.
I still love our food impact, like can't avoid us. More true now than ever.
That's what last night I was saying.
So they have an HOA that doesn't allow political campaign signs and doesn't allow federal laws. It's very interesting is the Felix manufacturer. Neither of us not there. No, it's not our
would be their own wall. And in the middle are 10 plates. Beautiful.
Okay.
Yes, I'll send it to you.
I was wanting to, considering,
Sorry, Dave.
if it's possible, to share my screen. I can live and as people share them on their ideas.
Chris or
So she wants to talk to someone else besides me. Okay, sending that to you now.
Thank you. So are you looking at asking our input on, I didn't hear it back there, and then I realized they have a plugin that I could actually put my hearing on.
Oh, yeah.
So that's really good for me.
Yeah, asking for your input on the project. Yeah, if you, we need to look at the topic there, is it for you? Is it like, description of what the project might be? You're welcome.
All right, just sent to you.
Thank you.
Yep.
You need them to share post.
I got, I wonder if I can, so I need to, I would love to share my screen so that I can just do live typing. So I was gonna get on into the Dropbox and can I, if you release control of sharing, so that I can do sharing from the Dropbox?
I don't know if it's possible.
Typically is in Zoom.
You're doing Zoom.
I can't right now. Right now it's. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Okay, so I'll not share right now, but I can. Actually, I'm gonna try to share.
Oh.
So folks should be able to see. I have a question for you. Is there a way to get power right now?
I can, please run and I'll find a.
Can you please, it's going to be in the state of respiration pretty quickly?
Not a problem. I'll be right back.
Okay, thank you.
Right now it is the screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it looks like there's not that much flexibility in the camera. Because some people are asking, we want to see what's on that stuff on the live.
Yeah. You know what, we could actually take a photo and post that.
Okay. Yeah.
But guess what, Felix, that might have to be real, because I literally forgot on Facebook.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
I
fair.
have a social media.
Oh, the Zoom. What's the camera for the Zoom? Huh? What's the camera for the Zoom?
So the Zoom right now is showing only this PowerPoint slide. Okay, and then during the, so Felix, during the actual conversation, folks will see a live screen that I'm typing on. So instead, they won't have the visual of seeing it. Is that correct?
I would never use it, so it never occurred.
Okay, so can they see both? Like,
It might be doing a picture-in-picture. I think it is, yeah.
Okay, so then where would that camera be then? The one that people are seeing me from?
This camera here.
Yeah,
That camera. Yeah, so this is the only actual camera that's hooked up right
Yeah,
now.
check it out, this is what people are saying.
Okay, got it. So then, yeah, then I don't know how we get people to be able to see that stuff that are on the
Well, I'm not gonna write up there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're done with that?
Yeah, I'm done.
I'm wondering
If you want to take a picture of it, I could drop it into a PowerPoint slide.
Oh, awesome. Okay, I'll take a picture
And then share that whenever you want to bring it up.
Great.
We've got that. No, I actually have a similar.
Get started again.
But sports does not exactly feel like back. No, I'm just sort of all person like it's in a weird way. Some people move here and then they hear more hardcore and that kind of stuff. Sometimes because it's fine. I figure my family's. Well, that was when I was a little kid.
Yeah.
When I was a little kid.
Actually, Jason.
I was so excited for the diamonds. The diamond ball. That's what we got.
So people would be back
My experience.
as we get closer.
My experience with the outdoors was always like when you quit fishing. It was like I to get fishing.
One more thing.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
How does school come into play?
So when I see the girls.
So does it make sense for the school
That's cultural.
or do we maybe make it
It's fishermen.
So Felix, are we just waiting for Chris to come back from?
We can get started in a second. Yeah,
Okay.
because Chris has been in and out.
Did that go through okay? I haven't seen it show up yet.
I said it, but it was a little bit big, so it might take a second.
Yeah. No worries.
Okay, yeah. Sorry.
You're good. There's a lot of good conversation.
All right, we're going to go ahead and continue. Turn it back to Shelley.
Okay, thanks everyone. So welcome back. We are, I need to mute my mouse over here just a moment. Okay, we are beginning that part of our dialogue, and so folks should actually be able to see my screen right now, where we have an opportunity to hear from each of the assembly members their proposals or project ideas for allocating CARES Act funding. So for each of our assembly members and then administration after that. I have a set of bullet points up on the screen, but this has also been previously shared with you in the agenda, so I will soon take this down from the screen because we're going to be live typing what you're sharing with us, but broadly defined. We're hoping that each of you can share a description of the project that you'd like to propose or bring to the group for consideration. Area of impact, so if you thought about that, we talked about those outcome areas earlier. And again, you have the framework in written form or printed form as a reference. If you wanted to describe that as well, do you consider it a short-term or longer-term investment? And again, maybe you see that in both categories. Potential cost, to the degree that is possible. I definitely heard in our hopes discussion this morning, folks would like that level of detail if possible. And then we'd also like to understand if this is a new idea, so something that you're just bringing to the table or to the group's consideration for the first time, or you thought of it this morning, or even yesterday, or is this an idea that's had more investment and other conversations prior to today, so it's been something in development. So that would be appreciated as well. So those are broadly the items that we'd like you to touch on. I will be taking live notes for folks that are online and also for anyone in the room today so that you can sort of track the conversation yourselves. And with that, Felix, what are your thoughts about who and how we should start? So we want to do this alphabetically, or what is your pleasure?
Thanks. We should probably just go round the table, and let's say, okay, let's just start with Cameron. Are you okay with that, Cameron? And then we can go around the table.
Sure. What I'll do is I'm really interested in hearing all of them, but I'll throw out one and then pass it on if that's okay. Okay. Sure. Let me start. So brief description. One of the concerns that I've been hearing a great deal about are parents of school-aged children and their ability to have childcare for their children during the periods of time that they are not physically in school, and trying to manage online learning while they are working, or both were working. And so this incredible problem that we're going to face in terms of having thousands of children who don't have anywhere to go during the time they're supposed to be learning because their parents are at work. And so I have been meeting with, talking with some of the after-school program folks at Campfire and others, and they're thinking about some work that they've been doing to create more opportunities for school-aged children, for them to both be in the learning environment that is safe, but also have a place for them to go. So this is very, very early in the process, but it is, I see it as a short-term impact, because it's going to sort of be something that is going to address the need immediately when school starts. And it may change depending on what the threat level is for the school district. So the initial ask is for $6 million, and it is to create enhanced school-age childcare opportunities and learning opportunities, focused primarily on the highest need areas and schools in our district, but depending on the capacity to be able to expand into other areas as well. So let's see. Looking at your guidelines, I think that's it. My hope is to have a great deal more dialogue on this. There's a group of folks working on this, and so I want to give them the opportunity to do it. I guess the only other thing I would say is that the need to allocate the funding, like so many others, is there's a short timeline, because in order to get ramped up to be able to provide these kinds of services for families prior to the start of school is going to take time. Most of these organizations are already dealing with a lack of capacity to be able to do the work that they're already doing. And so the sooner that we can provide resources for them so that they can ramp up such services, the better. And so these include things like supporting families who are experiencing financial hardship, stabilizing the workforce, potentially providing transportation, and really helping families to sustain through this time when schools are in flux. That's it.
Can I ask a process question?
Sure, yeah.
So I think some of us have been working in groups on certain things. And I believe that Cameron and I have been speaking with similar people on these kind of issues too. And so how do we communicate that? When someone has a proposal that several of us actually are all sort of on board with or have versions of, should we talk about that when they bring it up, or should we bring it up when it comes to us? And then also, are we doing sort of, we each put out one and we go around, or like, here is my list of 12 things that I've been thinking about working on?
Yeah. Do you want me to take it, Shelley?
I think that it would be most valuable for you and for others that are listening in if Cameron just proposed an idea about childcare, enhanced childcare. If you have additions to that you want to share, I think that's the opportune time to do that, so that we're packaging it under the same umbrella. So I think that would be most advantageous, and then not recognizing that some of you came to the table with 12 projects that you'd like to share. Let's do the popcorn style and go around the room and get one idea. Instead of having one person dominate the microphone for 12 project ideas, so that we have opportune time to hear from everybody.
Okay, can I go follow up that, Mr.
Yeah.
Sure. So, if we take the popcorn approach, I want to be clear that I might go in a certain order, doesn't mean that's my priority, if that makes sense. I'm not going to prioritize this, like, here's my top thing, and then wait till it gets back to me, because there's going to be this very dynamic conversation. We're putting a lot of ideas on the board. And
sure, and I don't think anyone's making an assumption that that's going to, what you're saying is your top priority.
And then, and then I also like to speak, because you said that is the most appropriate way. I'd like to ask a question, sort of, and speak a little bit to Cameron just proposed, if that's okay.
Yeah, and actually, I guess sort of get your advice on this, Shelley.
Yeah.
So what I am hoping is that we can sort of maybe get all of our ideas on the board before we do a little bit too much of sort of back and forth, because I think I really want to hear from everyone.
Yeah.
And my worry is that if we do too much back and forth, we're hearing from the same folks, not to be rude, but I really want to hear from everyone.
No, agreed. And I think just what you're adding for us is like you have a similar idea or connected idea to what Cameron has just shared. So I think it's appropriate that you would go next to be able to share and add on to that idea.
I just want to. Okay. Ms. Alfeld.
Yeah, Meg, go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm not comfortable with this process in particular, because I feel like it's going to be really disjointed. I'm going to propose an alternative, and you can take it or leave it, but I would like us to at least get the name, the one-liner or two-liner, the amount of money, and the impact, just to get all of them up on the board, and then go into the deeper dives, because, I brought 8 proposals at $32 million. Like, I really want to, get into those, and I think that we're going to find a lot of overlap, and when I was going to be prepared to speak, I have everyone's initials who's also been working on it or who I've talked to about it built in, so that we can then feed into that. So that's my counter proposal.
Okay, that's fair, and it's helpful to understand the context of what you guys have brought to the table. So Cameron, I think if you could answer one more piece to your proposal, which is the question of, have you talked to other folks about this or been working with other folks on this?
No.
Okay. hopefully that then takes things to you, Meg, to present.
Thank you. As I mentioned, I have 8 proposals. The one that's similar to Cameron's, there's actually 2 of them. One is, and this is something Mr. Constant had mentioned and been refined, child care grants to parents at $5 million. They would be targeted to those who are less than or equal to 200% of the poverty level, and they would be flexible to do whatever was needed to fill in that gap that Cameron identified, and that would be urgent and short term. Similarly, $5 million for small business paid furlough grants. There is a federal program that provides family leave for individuals who need to do child care related to COVID, but there's a gap in that program if your small business won't be viable if you had to provide that. And those would be for small businesses falling in that gap and require the employer to apply for it. I'm just making sure I don't go faster than you do. So yeah.
But also short, and did you say short term on that one as well?
Short to medium term, I think that's going to play with the overall child care continuum we put together.
Okay. And so I might just back to your, just to make sure I'm covering the right level of detail. So the child care grant to parents. So you had this little descriptor there just in terms of the poverty level, and can you describe that again?
200% or less of the poverty line in terms of income for eligibility.
Thank you.
You're taking notes in detail on all this?
I'm getting as much detail as I can while I'm live typing, and folks, it is behind you. Yeah, and folks that are on Zoom can see this happening live as well. So they're getting the benefit of this broader sharing.
And Shelley, when you have a second, I apologize to jump in. I just realized that there was another part of our guidelines, and that was the leveraging piece. I just wanted to add really quick on mine that the school district is willing to step in and look at providing space, look at providing additional, not financial, but other kinds of resources to support opportunities for enhanced child care. So there's a leveraging opportunity there for the school district is willing to participate.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And actually, just one clarification piece, and I want to thank everyone for your patience as we figure this process out together. So I think one of the things that might be helpful is, aside from talking about which assembly members that you talked with about your proposals, talk about which community folks that you talked with or organizations. So Karen, it sounds like you talked with the school district about what you're thinking about. Right. So I think that would be helpful.
Campfire as well.
Yeah, and so maybe in that vein then, Meg, on the first one, so child care grant to parents, we got the description, potential cost $5 million, and then the collaboration piece, so you mentioned the
Parents, lots and lots of parents.
Okay.
And then on the business grants, the only collaboration so far has been a small business in town who's piloted it themselves, as well as I mentioned it to the administration.
Okay, and then did you say a dollar amount for that?
$5 million. Thank you. And I have an impact for that one actually. One sec.
Sorry, you said you have what?
I have an impact. It could be making some assumptions. We could impact up to 7,500 people, and that would be assuming like a $2,000 a month ability to pay for a furlough amount for that for a small business, which that makes some assumptions, but it's at least a ballpark. So now I have 2 really specific ones, and one is dedicated transportation for the mass shelter. That's
so we are going to go through all of our lists. We're not going to go down person to person.
Yeah, it sounds like that's the path that we're on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was
Because we're
specifically told
doing
that was what we were doing.
we have a modified version of it, which is the very brief description.
Okay.
Get them out on the table. Thanks for everybody's adaptability. Let's go.
okay. So dedicated transportation for the mass shelter.
Got it. Yeah.
That's $50,000. I'm sorry, I've got notes everywhere. I apologize, guys. It's been a little bit chaotic, as we all know. It is, $50,000. The impact would be, it's urgent now, and the collaborators are the actual shelter provider, Beams, and the administration through Nancy Burke.
So that's like Beans and Sullivan?
At Sullivan, yeah. So this would be dedicated. They're right now using Uber and Lyft, so this would be something different and more reliable and fully under their control.
So specific transportation?
Yes. So that medical appointments, et cetera, that can't be provided there, can be provided. I have one I've been working on with Austin, and this is it's kind of rough, but we know the federal unemployment stimulus is ending, so stimulus payment at the total amount would be $14.5 million. And the targeted audience would be, sorry, I gotta bring back up my notes here. Folks, I believe, within 150% of the poverty line, 200%. And we've mentioned it to the administration. We've also mentioned it to Nolan and Alyssa for some feedback on that one. Let's see.
Are you looking for more information?
I'm looking for that text I sent you with the details. I apologize, guys.
Is it short or long-term investment, guys? I know.
Short. It would be meant to stop the massive impact of
I guess the whole short and long, I mean,
Yeah.
sort of a spectrum, so I don't know. Like, does it help a family long term?
Yeah.
But it's, so the whole structure to me seems a little hard to, but anyway.
Take your best guess at it, I guess, is the
Yeah, I mean, other people can guess from my end. So you said Amherst has a 9.2% poverty rate, which is about 29,000 people. If we give each of those folks, including kids.
I'm just going to suggest you turn your mic on.
My mic doesn't work.
Oh.
So
I found it. So if we do the 9.2% poverty rate for Anchorage times our population, which is 29,000 people, if we give each person, including kids, $500, that's $14.5 million. So it'd be like a $500 stimulus check to anyone at the poverty line or below, which is 29,000 people. Okay, almost done, guys. The Volunteers of America program, you are all more familiar with it. That's with Austin. It's mental health clinicians in the schools. And that is actually, I don't know if we want to capture that, but that's an item already introduced and postponed to the 28th.
Was there going on with that?
1 million. The next one is a proposal I received from 9-Star for employment at $300,000. And I'll just forward the email to everyone. It would be a short to midterm investment for employment. And when we get into the specifics, I'm happy to discuss it more, but I would have to bring up all of my notes. The next one is mental health first responders with Forrest and Austin. The proposal from me, at least, is $7 million. The urgency it would be a mid to long-term investment. It would see the program moving forward. And infrastructure to do it. And then the alcohol tax for sustainability. And then, let's see, I think I only have one left. So thanks for bearing with me, guys. Is what I mentioned previously is some kind of assembly infrastructure investment, I guess is what I would call it. And right now, I don't have a dollar figure because I wasn't able to pull up the line items in our budget, but I'm sure we all can find that. And that would be to give us some capacity to deal with COVID-related items that are coming before us and communications around the COVID relief. And that would be a short-term investment. And the potential costs, someone probably has a better sense of what our overall budget isn't that big. So those are all of the ones that I brought today.
Okay, Meg, I might just go back here really quickly. So in terms for the mental health clinicians in schools, is that, were you collaborating with others to?
Volunteers of America, and Austin, and Providence Behavioral Health, and NAMI.
Thank you. 9-Star, same thing, so 9-Star as a collaborator.
Yes.
Any others?
No.
Okay, how about for the mental health first responders, collaborators?
So the administration, to some extent, mental health trust, APD, NAMI, and I guess to the extent we may want to make a note, it would fit within the state's crisis now model.
Thank you. Okay, and it sounded like the assembly infrastructure one, maybe that's a newer idea. Did you, any collaborators, folks you've been working with on that?
I've talked to Chris and Suzanne.
Thank you. Okay, anything else, Meg?
Yep, that's it.
All right, thank you.
And then feel like that's for you.
Yeah. Okay, two points of order opportunities. So number one, recognize that we have assembly members and maybe even administration that have come to the table today with varying degrees of detail, or maybe you are coming to the table with just a very preliminary project idea. You've spent no time thinking about the details. We strongly still want to support you and encourage you to share that today. Even if it's completely roughed out, you thought about it like 5 minutes ago. This conversation that we're having right now is sparking ideas for you. This is the opportunity to brainstorm. So I want to make sure that folks feel comfortable with that and that it's not necessary to have all this level of detail. And then additionally, just a quick pulse check. Are we doing okay, everyone, with the process? Just hitting on kind of the highlights, getting through the list of people's ideas, and then we have an opportunity to see that as a full package once everyone has had a chance to share their ideas. I do also know that it's 12:04, so I'm not sure when lunch is going to come out, and we'll eventually need to come to a stopping point to give folks that were, especially if they have had something else going on at noon.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So it's really helpful to have it up here, but in terms of once we have 20 ideas and we're trying to work with it, to me, like a board style or a big, how are we going to do that?
Well, I have the opportunity to also collapse these into like a shorter list of ideas. And that might also be a process question that happens after. So let's see where we get with just this initial sharing. And we can think about a strategy for getting it into one place where you can consider the full suite of things, which might be a Word document that we put together in a collapsed version.
Okay,
organizations that I had talked to actually send an email to the assembly with their proposal, and so you've probably seen, I think, 3 of these, I think, are actually in your emails. They don't all have the amount of detail that we'd actually want before we move forward, and they have some. So the one that I know, a few people, I know Chris has been working on it, is Covenant House. And I think maybe a few other people as well. I had a conversation with them. Their proposal, it's really 3 proposals. I think the sum total, I think is either 2 or 2.5 million. I think it's 2.5. I was just trying to do the math right now. I think it's 2.5 million if you were to go with all 3 proposals fully funded for what they're asking. But there are 3 sub-proposals too, so I think that as we drill down, we'll see how that goes. It's both short and long term. In the short term, they have some direct COVID-19 costs they are asking us to help reimburse. Apparently costs of the municipality, according to them, shifted upon them. I see Jason is giving me the eye, so perhaps they have a different view of that. But at any rate, it's hard to recognize with the mask. Anyway, so they also have a longer term opportunity to leverage some federal funds and private donor dollars to expand the number of beds at Covenant House, which is, I think 22 beds is the number that they told me. And I won't sell it to more than that, just to say that can be potentially transformational. So, yeah, I think that's enough detail on that one. You've seen it in your email. They've got a much longer description. Did everybody receive that? I thought it was sent to the full group. From her name's Allison. She sent it a couple days ago. But I'll forward that to second, I've had a few conversations with Unite Here, which is the union representing workers in the visitor industry. And the visitor industry has been uniquely crushed this summer. They have something like 90% unemployment in their workforce right now for the people who are, and I don't mean like hunting guides in the Kenai. I mean people in Anchorage that are maids, what's the appropriate term? That are cleaning rooms, that are janitorial staff, that are working in the kitchens, that are doing and themselves are typically some of our more vulnerable community members too. And they had a couple of different thoughts that comport with other ideas that we had. So one thing they talked about was rental assistance. So I'm just going to say rental assistance. That of course goes much beyond Unite Here and the visitor industry, but it's something that they have identified that, and something we've identified before. The number I have is $20 million, very significant amount of money towards rental assistance. And of course, they're not the only ones I talked to about it. A lot of people see, and I know Fields has been talking a lot about this too, the oncoming tsunami of evictions. And so that's another thing we're working on. Unite Here also spoke about food vouchers to places like Cars, Costco. They said that they had a program where they had $50. People who can get $50 in basically fungible food vouchers. That goes more than food. You could spend that also, if you use $50 to Cars or Costco or Fred Meyer, you could spend it on diapers, for example, as a common expense that people don't anticipate.
Just for clarification, so you said rental assistance, are you still talking about food vouchers also for visitor industry workers?
In both these cases, I didn't phrase this well. That is where these ideas came from, but they are not limited to them. I'm not proposing that we say only visitor industry workers can get rental assistance by any means. I'm just describing where these ideas help come from.
Okay.
Another is food vouchers. They did not have a dollar amount, and I don't have detail there. They just described it as they had done a program that was basically $50 and that it was very helpful for their members. Someone else maybe could speak to the Visit Anchorage $4 million proposal. That should be on the board. Hopefully someone else wants to speak to it in more detail. Obviously the visitor industry folks were also interested in that. They were a little concerned that as it was structured, it wasn't going to do enough directly for them. But, okay, so moving on.
And for the visit, what is that for?
$4 million, we got a detailed description from Julie Sape. Hopefully someone else will describe it more than I. Child care, I'll just throw it out there. I mean, I advocated for the full $30 million. Thread has again indicated that they would like us to fully fund it at $20 million. I think that both Cameron and Meg have you can put that at $20 million because we already put $10 million towards it. I think Cameron and Meg have both articulated programs that are similar and that maybe are a little more detailed. But I think the full scope of it, $20 million is kind of the ask. Similarly, I have had conversations with some parents and some very activist parents about the school start date and about the original idea was hiring sort of paraprofessionals within the schools to, because the school right now, they're anticipating 2 days on, 3 days off. And so paraprofessionals to basically use other school facilities to try to have some kind of, classroom isn't the right word, but for the kids that are on their 3 days off, they could go there and be there in a learning environment. I don't think that is sort of far enough down the road that I have a specific number for it. And I think that some of the same folks were talking to Cameron about his idea as well, so that might have evolved. I would put, the number I would actually put is, this goes to the idea Chris had about contingency funds. I would like us to consider up to $20 million in a contingency fund around the school start date. That is, we actually don't know what is going to happen. I know that they're saying this is their plan, but first of all, we don't know if that's going to happen. And secondly, what does happen when kids start getting COVID-19 in the schools? Do they close the schools again in October or November? If one kid gets it, do you close the whole school? If 10 kids get it, do you close the whole school? If a teacher gets it, do you close the school? And so $20 million in the school start date contingency fund is the top line idea I had there. Here's a very small one that they finally were able to send an email. I've been bothering about it for a while. The Iditarod reached out to me. They have worked with the Matsu Borough, actually already approved $300,000 for the Iditarod, for their end of the Iditarod out starting in the Matsu Valley. The Iditarod has asked us for $300,000 as well. And there isn't a lot of detail there, but they want to have the Iditarod happen again. And there's an email in your inbox. You've probably seen a lot more detail and a lot more justification for why the Iditarod might be a good thing to save. Let's see. Assisted living. So there's an email in your inbox. It's a pretty inchoate idea right now, but
I think it was just sent to you.
Oh, okay. So collaborating with, but I haven't had a direct conversation with Austin yet about it. I think we've been talking to the same people, me, Austin, and Pete, about the idea. So some assisted living facilities are in pretty tough places right now, partly because they have additional expenses around, they have to be very careful, obviously, because of the threat COVID-19 poses to them. And so there's money for PPE is part of that proposal. Also, there are certain facilities that are under-enrolled right now that maybe they were just in the process of getting started or for whatever reason they're under-enrolled. And it is extremely difficult apparently to sort of in-process new people into these facilities. This is just the information I'm getting. And so there are certain facilities that are facing perhaps closure, which would be a mass unemployment event, and also put a lot of seniors at risk. And so the ask there is for $1 million. And let's see here.
Or do you think that's enough?
$1 million? That's the number that I sort of brainstormed with folks, but maybe your number is larger.
Well, I'm just looking at the email. It doesn't have to be this way, but 2 ideas one's expenses associated with reduction of COVID risks, so like changing facilities, PPE, the
Yeah.
stuff you mentioned, $50K per facility, so depending on how many facilities there are. And then for newer facilities that opened in the past year, maybe supplement, people aren't at those facilities now, so supplementing that revenue. And this said no more than $750K per facility. I don't know how many facilities there are, so I think there needs to be a little more work. What do you think?
200 in Anchorage.
Make saying 200. So I think you could really scale that.
So one would, yeah.
I mean, you could narrow it to newer facilities. There's one in East Anchorage that just opened that, in the most terrible time ever, and they're serving elderly folks. So anyway, I think there's a place to scale that, but I don't know what the max is. But 1 to 10, I mean.
Somewhere between $1 and $100 million.
Yeah, approximately. Yeah.
I'm just gonna leave the dollar amount blank right now.
Yeah, you can put a range. I mean, 1 is fine. 1 to 10, I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think any of us. Well, I should say. Go ahead.
That's all I have for now. And yeah.
Okay, thanks. Jamie, would you like to share something?
I do, thank you. I just want to say thank you. I believe that good planning makes for awesome and successful operational execution. So let me go through my notes. I have some here on my phone. It looks like a lot of the points were hit, but I'm going to go through some of mine anyways. So I wanted to start off with discussing a little bit about our homeless population. I realize these are just some of my notes, I could be off a little bit. 737 beds plus 51. So they said there's 788 total physical health beds are now available within Anchorage. 376 are other facilities, I believe maybe mental, emotional, and rehabilitation. I'm not sure the category the care that they all fall in. There's 1,113 current as of 20th April. I'm saying this for a reason. I don't have the specific information on directly related with the COVID. I know 376 beds are probably moving, let's see, with nursing homes, hospice, mental health, emotional rehabilitation. I don't have the exact research. This is just numbers I've been working with in the last couple of days. So I say those things because on the $22.5 million that we've been discussing, I believe on moving forward with that, I believe that actually the homeless have been the least impacted because they have gotten the most or have received the most care based off of they have better housing than they did. They have better care than they did prior to COVID-19 and more food and other resources that we've been given to them. So I'm proud to say our community, and we've made some pretty good decisions on those items. So I'm going to start off with, I feel that I believe the most impacted would be our small businesses. Our small businesses are major drivers of our economy. They've employed XX%, still working on my research, of our citizens. The payroll of these businesses changes hands within the community, multiply times the adds about between 1.25 to 1.40 times of original value of business's output. The opposite of this is true as an economy contracts. People hold their money for future hardships and do not contribute to economic growth. To return to our former successful economic recovery, we need to support small businesses. We do this by executing a well-thought-out plan of tax cuts, deregulation, economic incentives to foster an environment where our small business owners can thrive and grow. So my plan, I'm working on it. And I think we have about 69,150 small businesses. We employ about 316 people, approximately 15% of the employable population. And I will break it down to our Anchorage location. So what I'm looking at doing is focusing on our small businesses. I'm looking at $33.8 million for small businesses. I also would like to add, I know Mr. Dunbar has talked about rental relief. This is really important, but I also know if you're renting from a landlord, so that would be for me, landlord relief would be $18.6 million, and that's just an estimate. My small business plan of the $33.8 million would also include our daycare providers as small businesses, so that when folks do get back to work, we can provide the daycare to get back on their feet, as this will also trigger continuous employment, because I did just see something flash across my screen that the unemployment $600 is going to come to an end. Anything can change, but I'm going off of what I just saw about 15 minutes ago. I also have concerns. I don't have a number for individual family daycare relief, but I'm willing to work with people on that to see what we can find out. Suicidal concerns, mental health, Ms. Zolotel hit on that. I appreciated it. I think that's a great idea. We had, I believe, 195 suicides last year in the state alone, which is as an epidemic here in Alaska. We need to continue with that. I believe that the coronavirus has affected people's mental health deeply. The tourism costs, I don't have a number. I am concerned with our tourism industry, as they seem to have gotten hardly any, if I don't know the numbers on the relief that they have gotten. I've heard complaints that they haven't. I need to dig into that. And then I would like to allocate for our first responders $5 million for safety. And then one other thing I think is of value to the mental health of our children. And I do agree with some of the issues that were brought up and concerns with our education, to get our kids protected, our teachers protected, our schools protected, and maybe we can be better assistance with the PPE, because as Mr. Dunbar said, we don't really know what might happen in October. We might see that everybody's doing great, and then all of a sudden we might have kids impacted and teachers impacted with the might get sick. So my last request would be for athletics and camps. I know that these children have not been able to do their sports and their active lifestyles that they used to, and I have children of my own. I know how much they thrive in athletics and camps and being able to socialize. There's many sports that you can still do that would allow you to have that space in between, and soccer, baseball, even swimming, ski camps, any sort of camps that they have going on. It's been detrimental to our children's health that they have not been able to socialize in the way they need. And these athletic camps and sporting events have been impacted because of the lack of participation. And if we could somehow subsidize to help folks pay for them and to help these camps and athletic events, I really believe that it's so important for our mental health. So it could possibly fall under the mental health part of it, but I just really wanted that to be directed as well. It's a real rough draft, but I do want to be able to work with folks and see what we can come up with to further these ideas.
Thanks so much, Jeannie. So I think we are preparing to break for lunch, and Felix, I just maybe a reminder, we're going to give folks an hour for that break. I did want to mention a couple of things, but I think we have some other announcements potentially.
Yeah, so COVID-19. So for setup of lunch, we're going to need to leave the space for 15 minutes. Then lunch will be set up. Then we will come back in.
Can I ask a question? For my colleagues, is anyone opposed to working during lunch?
No, I'd like to.
Yeah, let's keep going. Anybody opposed to that? What's that?